excited to get started. And first off, please join me in welcoming Sabrina Wu, Youth Program Coordinator at Project Vision. Sabrina, Project Vision has worked hard to bring youth into your decision-making process. I just mentioned an example of that earlier. You've really involved and engaged youth in determining the greatest needs in your community and then organizing programming to respond to those needs. Can you share with us how your organization has successfully built the skills and capacity of youth to be decision makers and problem solvers in your community?
Yeah, of course. Just give me a second to get a little presentation I have prepared pulled up.
Awesome. Thank you.
Please let me know if you can't see my screen for whatever reason. Um, but yeah, like Catherine and Tiffany said, hi, my name's Sabrina. I'm a program coordinator here at Project Vision. And, I'm just here to talk about some of the skills that we use to engage our youth with the community and programming. So really quick, just for those of you who don't know what Project Vision is, we're just a nonprofit based in Chinatown that's aimed towards providing holistic development for youth. So I'm not going to go over all of our goals. We just kind of sum it up with our nice little model, learn, serve, lead, and thrive. So our main approach to kind of engaging our youth within the community and programming is by practicing something that we call equity-centered community design, which is a bit of a mouthful. But ultimately, by practicing this, we're hoping that youth are able to look beyond their personal needs and interests and see themselves as part of the community. They're able to build the skills and capacities to become decision makers and problem solvers. And then ultimately, and most importantly, I think, is they're able to hold meaningful roles within our organizations and see themselves as collaborators to their mentors. So kind of what is equity-centered design really quickly? It's just, a design practicing mindset that focuses on understanding the structure and needs of a given community and having the designer, which in our case is going to be the youth, co-collaborating with that community to problem solve and create equitable design or equitable solutions at the end. So kind of before we even get into actually practicing equity-centered community design, we do some tasks with the youth that sort of get them into that mindset. So the first thing that's really easy is just creating community agreements with our youth. Community agreements are just essentially a set of rules that are based on a common ground of respect for all community members. And we're saying that especially within the space that we're working with our youth. So youth understand too that us as our mentors have a common ground of respect for them. The next thing too is acknowledging that there is power within language. As our youth kind of move through these community projects, they might encounter some heavy terms such as like power, oppression, and like privilege. And instead of giving youth definitions to these terms, we should encourage them to create definitions themselves based on their own lived experiences and personal knowledge, because in that way they're able to start empathizing with language a little bit. And then to kind of get youth to start seeing themselves as part of the community that we're looking at, they should create community maps, which are essentially just visual representations of the needs, structures, and perspectives of a community that youth are really looking at and seeing how they can identify that. And then finally, too, there's mind mapping, where they're going to take all their knowledge, maybe they've done some research, maybe they haven't done any really, or even their biases as well on a given topic or issue that they're trying to identify within the community. So when we're going through the actual equity-centered community design process, you can see it's a little long, and it's pretty thorough too, but it's kind of based in the idea that, as long as we're thorough and we take our time with this, the community can actually get the real care that they need. As Tiffany mentioned, something that we really highlight too is that research aspect within the project. So there's two parts to that research, as you can see, when we look at like exploration and research. There's that, academic research where students are going online, they're reading journals, articles, to just gain that more technical knowledge about a specific topic. But then the really important aspect is that community research, where they're actually able to identify those patterns and insights and problems within the community. And what that might look like is, students might be creating surveys, questionnaires, or polls, or they're even going out into the actual community and interviewing community members to really understand where the background information and context on certain issues are coming from. And then as they kind of move through, they scope down their project to a single issue, because while, youth are really hopeful too, and they want to change everything and save the world, we just need to understand that the capability sometimes of a certain person or organization or group is a little limited. So really defining what they're able to accomplish within scoping. But the things I also want to emphasize too is, as I kind of move through from like scoping to ideation, as we move into like action plan and prototyping, we're still going back into the community and gaining feedback on what the youth are working on, really understanding are the solutions that they're coming up with something that will really benefit the community? Making sure the youth, going back to one of our goals, are actually looking beyond their personal needs and interests and really identifying themselves as part of the community they're trying to address. And then, the most important part too is that as they kind of close out these projects as well, they don't just leave the community and just leave the project. They're still evaluating again. So I know it's a lot of surveying and sometimes the youth get a little tired of it, but something we always emphasize is that the data that they're getting from these like surveys and the research that they're doing is really important to actually implementing change, because as when they finish out their project and implementation, they do that final research, they might even have the opportunity to go back to their projects, and with that final data they're able to just continue growing and improving on what they've done in the past. So some things to consider, like, as we're kind of moving through this process, just some general tips are, everyone's intersectional and not one person is just defined by one part of their identity. And once we're kind of able to accept the fact that everyone is intersectional, it's just the first step to understanding that we're able to empathize with everyone. And then another part too, kind of mentioned, is meeting youth on that common ground of respect. Is that, it's really easy for youth to respect us as adults in the room, but we need to show that we have respect for them as well. Because, we're able to show our respect for the various communities that we work with as us and adults in our everyday lives, but we should also be able to do that with the youth as well. So it might sound a little silly, but even just being like, hey, like, let's watch a TikTok together gets youth to start building that relationship and knowing like, oh, this person kind of sees me more as an equal instead of just someone below them. And along with that too is encouraging youth to youth mentorship. When we acknowledge the skills and value that youth have and let them share out to their peers, it really lets them know like, I'm capable of doing more, and kind of allows them to start moving more into that growth mindset. And then finally on there, I have calling in versus calling out. So this really goes in hand with the challenges that I have listed. We oftentimes, because they're young, and we need to remember, you're not born with knowing everything. We're adults and we've learned things over time. And that's kind of the stage that our youth are with right now. So they might be unfamiliar with certain ideas or cultures, or might even have some preconceived like biases and prejudices that they might not even be aware of. But the importance of calling out versus calling in, calling out still kind of gets the jobs done. It addresses the behavior and lets them know that's not okay, but it still might embarrass a student, for example, in a certain setting you're doing it, or even to like, it doesn't actually give a youth like the chance to learn upon that experience. So calling in and having that conversation and learning it, and kind of with that, letting them know that failure is okay and that they can make these certain mistakes, because by creating, we always mention a safe space, but by creating like a true safe space where the youth feel okay with like failing and learning within that, they're able to, continue with that growth mindset. And kind of the last one is just something that you're always going to encounter. I know I've seen my fair share of spats, but just like interpersonal conflict within the youth, it can be over something really petty, just like them having a like miscommunication, or like youth being very outwardly like mean to one another, but giving them the skills to deal with that interpersonal conflict, and understanding that, us as adults should always be giving the youth the skills to address these issues, but encouraging them to utilize the skills themselves, really letting them know that they have the power to enact these actions themselves is what's going to encourage them to continue to move forward. So I know I kind of breeze through things a little quick, but that's just for the sake of time. But kind of some two key things that you can take away from this are, youth-led curriculum and learnings, going back to that mentor, like youth to youth mentorship, just really empowering the youth to let them know that they have the skills and value within our organization, to see them as, you too can make an impact upon your peers. It's not just up to us as the workers to do that. Like, it's everyone's part of the community. And then also to bring the community to the youth. This is just thinking a bit about the youth accessibility, kind of going back into research. Maybe a youth does want to get out into a community, but depending on just like their own experience and skill level, they might be a little nervous or just not even know where to start. So it can be something as easy as, bringing a group of people that youth can interview to talk about the community, or even inviting community speakers to talk about their own personal experiences within. So just kind of breaking down that first barrier for youth to gain the confidence to do it themselves. And then finally, too, I just have a little QR code that has resources, both free and paid for, if any of you guys are interested in implementing community-centered design yourself. So I'll just leave that up there for a couple seconds. And then with that, that's all I have to say today. I have my email listed below if you want to talk any more, just kind of elaborate more on anything else I've spoken about. But thank you guys so much.
Wow, Sabrina, that was amazing. I mean, I immediately found some things I can use with my own kids, calling in, calling out, the power in language, so much, so many good nuggets in there. Thank you so much for sharing all that. And I know that many of you have likely experienced viewing and valuing youth as decision makers and problem solvers. It's often easier said than done. So would any of our other panelists like to share any tips or suggestions for overcoming resistance that might arise to giving leadership over to the youth? Any panelists have any tips that they'd like to share relative to that?
I would say one of my tips that I'm actually going to give to you guys that I want to bring to Sabrina, um, just basically trust in your youth, like you, like giving them full trust in their ability to lead. Like they're part of your program for a reason. So if they're part of your program for a reason and you know that you have equipped them to be leaders, then give them that ability to lead. I think so often as mentors, sometimes we get in a power trip and because we're their mentors and we're their leaders, we expect for them to do exactly what we want them to do. But as
Hmm.
a leader, a good leader takes in accountability, but then also release the reins and
That's
give
right.
the youth
Get
the
out of their
forefront.
way, right,
Get out of their
Catherine?
way. They know best. They're lead
They know
their youth.
best.
Give the youth
Yes,
the time to lead other youth. That's why
that's
we do
right.
this program, because
That's
we want to
right. I
instill
love it.
and build up leaders. So
I
yeah.
love that. I love that. As you mentioned, Sabrina, the youth to youth mentorship, even that is empowering them to mentor their own youth and you getting sort of out of their way and empowering them. That's perfect. Perfect. And a perfect segue into our next speaker, who is Catherine Stapleton, who is joining us from Build Inc., and she's the youth leadership coordinator at Build Inc. And Catherine, Build Inc. has developed a highly effective approach to building youth's leadership capacity through advocacy and civic engagement. Can you share more with us about how Build Inc. develops leaders through service learning opportunities?
Yes. So I want to give it like a little background of Bill before I jump into it, because I want you guys to be familiar with Bill. I took down notes. So if I look down on my paper, I'm looking at my notes.
No
Okay.
problem.
So Bill stands for Broader Urban Involvement and Leadership. So Bill started off in 1969 as a gang intervention organization. Now we turned into a gang intervention organization, a violence prevention organization, and youth development organization. So we're basically developing our youth to be leaders. Let's
Mhm.
remove ourselves and give our
That's
youth
right.
the space to be leaders. We are
That's right.
literally in the perfect space in Austin, where so much is going on in the community, violence and racial unrest and all that stuff. So it's important for us to equip our youth as civic leaders in the community to advocate for themselves. They
That's right.
know what's best, what they need in the community. We cannot
Hmm.
just speak and go to those tables and speak for our youth. No, bring our youth to those tables, or bring the
Hmm.
tables to them so that they
That's
can
right.
speak and advocate for themselves. So that's what Build is basically about. My program, I am the youth leadership coordinator over our youth council program, and it's a co-ed program, but so happen I have all females, and it's a cohort of 15 to 17 young women, ages between 16 to 23, and my main focus is teaching them to be leaders in the community, advocating for themselves through civic engagement, challenging norms, challenging policies, getting in front of the public officials and speaking up for themselves, advocating for themselves. But also I have a component that I added, and it's also cultivating a sisterhood, because our young women need that. They need to know how to step into rooms, be themselves, be boss women, and
Hmm.
advocate for themselves, but also come together and work together as a community, not having cliques and having that. No, we're stronger together. So that's my basis of my program. We have workshops. Our youth are actually leading workshops. We have peer to peer mentorship. We have youth leadership engagement, where the youth are actually leading peer circles. They're actually leading conflict resolution circles. They're leading workshops. They're actually talking to public officials of themselves. Also, I am also creating a space a safe space for our youth. In order to do that, you have to establish guidelines. You have to
Mhm.
establish values. In order for them to come into that space, how are they feeling coming to that space? You have to know, okay, I am my best self when I'm honest with myself, and I need for my peers to show me support. That's a guideline. So how can I establish that guideline so that our youth feel safe in that space? And lastly, like I said, trust your youth's ability to lead. Give them that power to lead. How you do that? You set up goals with your youth, hold them accountable, and allow them to reach goals. Don't put too much pressure on them to be you. Let them be themselves. Allow them to reach achievable goals. So that's not the gist of my programming build. I allow for my youth to run the program. I'm just there facilitating. And I ask
Mm.
them, may I speak or may I come to your space? Because at the end of the day, it's their space. I'm just facilitating the space, but they're leading the room.
Wow. Unbelievable, Catherine. That was really great. And I love how you talked about not only letting them be their authentic selves, but also
Mhm.
allowing them to understand the importance of building this sense of community and lifting each other up versus tearing each other down. That's
Mhm.
such an important life skill. I love it. And it builds on what Sabrina shared, the importance of giving, empowering them, creating space, building structures where
Mhm.
they can speak to leaders and bring in the community to them and allow them to go into the community. So I love it. Thank you so much, Catherine. And ensuring that youth, if you can speak just for 1 or 2 minutes about the compensation strategy that Build Inc. has built into helping, to really compensating youth for their time and their leadership and their contributions as well.
Yes. So all of our programs throughout Build is a paid program. Our youth are getting paid to show up, not just show up, but show up as themselves. We are getting paid. Some of them are getting paid through stipends. We have a program where we are working with where they are getting paid through our CYSC program, SYEP program, and Build are allocating those funds to reach them to help them. I also hire two ambassadors as well. So not only are our youth council getting paid through Build, but our youth ambassadors are also getting paid as well outside of Build. Because we have
Wow.
we have funds to allocate that for themselves, and now we have funds so that I can hire two more youth ambassadors for my program,
Wow.
and then
And you used two
also.
acronyms. Can you say what those acronyms were? You said, or they build specific acronyms, or you said CYEC or something like that.
So it's the acronym. I'm not really familiar with it,
Okay,
but
no
it's a
worries.
collaboration with Build. It's called
Okay.
SYEP and then CYSC.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So internal build collaborations. That I love
Hmm.
that. I love that. That's excellent. And so are there any others? Would any of our other panelists like to speak to why providing compensation to youth as part of these programs is so important? Is anyone else doing that? And if so, do you want to speak to why that's important or how that's been effective?
Yeah, I can actually speak to it. Because just like Catherine, Project Vision also has a CYSC and like really
Okay.
kind of also drilling into the students like, hey, this is like part of your job too. So like adding in that layer of like, yeah, we come here and we have fun and like we're
Hmm.
working on like these community projects that are also still to like that professional expectation, which we don't always want to bring in because we want to keep the atmosphere light, but it is something that goes back into like holding the students accountable to like
Exactly.
meeting certain
Yes.
markers and like working at a certain, like I said, just expectation that we have.
Hmm.
Absolutely. And can either of you speak to whether or not this pay or this compensation is for the whole year or is it seasonal?
For my
Question in
program,
the
it's a whole year for my program.
Okay.
It's a whole year.
Okay. Okay, great. That's great. Well, thank you for sharing both of these strategies. And I certainly am learning a lot. And I hope our listeners and our guests are learning a lot as well. And we're going to sort of recap some of these tips at the end as well. So we're really excited to be able to share some of these tips with you. Next, we welcome Tony Alvarado Rivera. Yeah,
Okay, okay.
I love it. Executive Director of Chicago Freedom School and Essence Jade Gatherite, Youth Organizer at Chicago Freedom School. Tony and Essence Jade, can you share with us how Chicago Freedom School involves youth as part of your core staff, not just as program participants?
Yes, thank you so much, Tiffany, and welcome. As we do that, I think we're going to share a little bit about CFS with a little slideshow. Essence, do you want to go ahead and our special guest? gather, right? You want to go ahead and start
Yes.
your work?
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you all so much for having me. So Chicago Freedom School, we were founded in 2007 by an intergenerational team of youth and adults who sought to just ultimately create a positive and safe space for young folks. And so it enables young people to explore social programs and through the lens of identity, and by designing and implementing their own action projects and ultimately just building and sustaining community. Right? And thinking about equipping them with the skills that they can take not just within space, but take outside of space and utilize within their schools, their communities, their neighborhoods, and even, you know, as we have young people who transition into college and just a larger scale, right? And so the Chicago Freedom School is rooted in the history of the 1964 Mississippi Freedom School, which was founded by the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, so SNCC, which is now celebrating its 60th anniversary. And so thinking about freedom schools in history, Chicago Freedom School opened its doors and it was the first freedom school of its kind in Illinois. And so 17 years later, we continue to be one of the few organizations that deeply respects young people's power and provides extensive training on how they can make change within just their schools, communities, and the world overall.
Our mission is to we cultivate and amplify the leadership of Black and Brown young folks as they envision and organize toward collective healing and liberation. Our core frameworks are centered around youth leadership engagement, anti-oppression, transformative justice, and healing justice. And as Essence defines those definitions, these are core to our programming to create space for young people to share. You know, when we think of like anti-oppression or transformative justice, we know that this is nothing new to young people, especially Black and Brown young folks and their experience. CFS is a place for us to learn from each other. All of our work is in circles. So we're all we're all teachers and, you know, students and learners. And so being able to swim in these frameworks. And the next slide.
Yes, so I think, and another thing that I do love and want to uplift is that while we do have our working definitions as an organization, oftentimes when we're in space, we'll encourage young people to create people's definition, right? What does this mean to you? What does this mean in the scope of this work or within this program? And I absolutely love seeing individuals just engage and kind of work through it of like, okay, wait, maybe I don't have like the entire like understanding of this, or this is, so essentially meeting people where they are, right? And like, this is what I think this is, right? And so I think that that's a really cool thing that we do. So in thinking about anti-oppression, right, we think about dismantling a system of supremacy that gives power and privileges to members of one group at the expense of another in order to marginalize and oppress communities that are fighting for liberation. When we think about transformative justice, we're thinking about a liberatory approach to violence, which seeks safety and accountability without relying on a sense of alienation, punishment, or state or systemic violence, or even tactics of disposability, right, that we see are extremely prevalent, while still working to repair the harm that was caused. And then thinking about healing justice as a framework that identifies how we can holistically respond to and intervene on generational trauma and violence and bring collective practices that can impact and transform the consequences of oppression on our bodies, hearts, and minds. And so these are all definitions that we work to ground young people in. Again, sometimes young people have these lived experiences, right? Especially when we think about what it means to bring young people from the inner city of Chicago, right? Where we know individuals are facing these oppressive systems and navigating public school systems and all of these things and these experiences, they don't often have that language, right? And so equipping them with the language to say, hey, actually what you're going through is very valid, it's very real, and this is what it's called, right? And giving them that step, because the first step to solving problems is acknowledging that there is a problem, right? And so grounding them in that awareness.
And so our core programs engage in these frameworks. And when we look at this youth engagement continuum chart that was created by, or that was shared by the Parent Family Foundation in 2013, is really thinking about the different ways that we can engage with young people in our programs. You know, there's no right or wrong, but there is a way of how do we work towards liberating all young folks. And for us at Chicago Freedom School, if you look at the strategy, we use a youth organizing strategy that moves away from like the role of young people as being like clients And there's some spaces where young people are clients, and we understand that. The work that we're doing as, in youth development, youth engagement rather, and youth leadership is really being able to incorporate young people into development, into leadership, into civic engagement, which we know some orgs do civic engagement, some don't. And for us, it's really thinking about that within liberatory practices. And that is naming power, that is naming who are impacted by systemic oppression. But then it's also making sure that we're building with young folks, offering leadership opportunities, thinking about, let me get my notes, thinking about deepening historical and cultural understanding, building skills and capacity, local education, building, cultivating and collecting and building young people as effective identities and agents of change, offer opportunities, of course, many folks to get paid, develop campaigns, and take active roles in organizing and activism. And so in our work, our programs, what slide is after this? Oh, yeah. Okay, great. Oh, perfect. Yeah. So our work, as many mentioned, we have our flagship program, which is the Freedom Fellowship, where young folks come in for the 4-week Summer Leadership Institute to be able to swim and engage and build upon our core frameworks, and being able to create space for young people to talk about social political issues. A lot of times we talk about mass incarceration, we talk about school to prison pipeline, we talk about gender-based violence, and really, how many spaces are created in our school systems or with our friends where we can talk about race, class, gender, sexual orientation. And at Chicago Freedom School, it's really the first time where a Black young person can engage with a young Latina brown person in a real deep way, or have a cisgender person be able to build with and love, affirm a gender nonconforming trans person. Really then having us be like, okay, what does it look like to engage with young people with disabilities? How do I build that with my peers? So that's a little bit about our work. So we have our Freedom Fellowship. We have young people engaged in our Youth Leadership Board, which is the governance piece of our larger board that has decision-making power on. They hire staff. They review budgets. They are part of the strategic visioning, strategic plan. We also have our Project Heal Us, which builds young practitioners in the reproductive justice field, that came out of our participatory evaluation team. Sorry, I'm in the South Loop. It came out of our participatory evaluation team, which is a group of young folks who are evaluating our programs, projects, and organizations. And so instead of having some outsider come in, we have young folks who are engaged in our programming, learn evaluation is not my strong point, but learn metrics, learn evaluation tools, develop them, all of that. I'm learning so much from them. And then out of that came Project Heal Us. We also have North Star Education Training Collective that works with young folks to take a deeper dive into trauma-informed care, healing-centered engagements work, that then they become consultants and are paid to facilitate our fee-for-service work on identity, power, and oppression, positive youth development, youth adult partnerships, the gray zone area. Also, yes, I get to see this hair, JJ. Okay. Okay.
I love it.
And so, a lot of our, again, is being able to engage young folks in that work and in civic engagement, while also, as many folks have been sharing, paying young folks, finding for opportunities to, we're still, we went from $475,000 organization to like 1 million. And so it's being able to also,
Congrats.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's being able to sustain that, but also being able to think about how we can at times hustle, be strategic, build partnerships with other orgs, other spaces, to make sure that young people can receive opportunities outside of our space. So we don't believe in hoarding youth leadership. If after one program they want to, peace out, yes, thank you for sharing space, energy with us. Thankfully, many folks want to come back, so we do have opportunities for them to build on their leadership engagement. And so that's a little bit about our work.
Wow, that's amazing. Essence, you want to share with us your personal experience and your transition to leadership there at Chicago Freedom School?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that is an experience that I just absolutely love, right? Joining the Chicago Freedom School literally changed like the trajectory of my life and like what I
Wow, that's powerful.
positive way, right? I joined when I was like the summer before my freshman year of high school, right? And so to look now, about what 6 years later, to be, graduating from college in like the next 2, 3 weeks, and like, oh, I'm like a staff, like I'm thank you, yes. Like I'm literally a staff person. I've grown in this space. I've been cultivated in so many ways, and I've definitely been able to engage within from doing the work, taking that work that summer from the SLI, our core program, and going into my schools, and literally that same school year leading a district-wide like walkout in support of like climate change and doing work with CTU, right? And organizing a protest in solidarity with them during their strike, with over thousands of students that same like following the Chicago Freedom School summer, right? I think that means a lot, right? When the following year I'm leading protests and again organizing with over thousands of young people, and going into my schools and campaigning for this. And I think even now looking, and it's been a long fight, but even looking now and to be able to say, well, I helped, get cops out of CPS, right? Like that is radical,
Mm.
right? And that's something I've been engaged in since I started at the Chicago Freedom School 5, 6 years ago, right? And so having their leadership program and having it established in a way where it's like a laddership program where you can grow, where you are cultivated in that way, but also to where it's like, even if I'm not engaged in programming, I still have these values that have been instilled in me that have empowered me in a way that no other space would, right? And made me aware of not just my power, but the power of others in organizing people power, right? And thinking about
Wow.
take those values and apply them to my everyday life and learning how to advocate not just for myself but for others around me to overall create what I feel to be a more just and equitable society.
Oh my goodness. I mean, Mike, is there a mic we can drop right now? Wow.
Yes.
Wow. I have so much I want to say. I know we have time, but first of all, you are amazing. And
Thank
I'm
you.
so happy our future is in good hands with people like you, Essence, Jade. I mean, you really are, you embody everything that Tony just mentioned, just the leadership, the confidence, the power, the passion, the coalition building. You've taken everything you've learned and you're making such an incredible difference in our community. You took that to college. Where were you in college, by the way? Where are you graduating from?
So right now I'm graduating from community college with my associates in computer information science, and I'll be transferring
Excellent.
to USC for
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I love that you took what you learned here and you're expanding that into your college space and your community in the city of Chicago. So there's so much more. One question I do have before we move on. What advice would you give the Tonys and Catherines and Sabrinas of the world when they talk about getting out of your way? I thought that was really good information that was shared and allowing you to lead. But what was like pivotal to you being able to really step into, your power as a youth leader?
I think it was the trust for me. It was trust and seeing how adults reaffirmed me of my value. Again, when we look at these systems of oppression, right, and this idea, and we see this concept of disposability in every aspect, right? Whether that be in school, oh wait, I'm talking too much in class, I'm getting put out for this, put out for resisting, and it was like being met where I was at, where it was like, whoa, okay, you have these ideas, like let me hear about them. And it's like, oh, I can, like, this is okay. Like, wow. And having that trust, right? When I'm like, yeah, man, I hate the police in my school. Like, I don't want them in here. They contribute to criminalizing young people. They like,
Mm.
all of these different things. These conversations where I'm like, well, then maybe you don't need them. And I'm like,
Like, really?
okay.
That's possible? Yeah.
Yeah, like, and having that
Uh-huh.
trust, right? And being reaffirmed in that,
Mm,
it was like, you can do that,
mm,
right? I think that
ooh,
meant the world to me. And again,
mm,
who look at Black and brown young people, who look at queer young
mm,
people, right? And
yeah.
try to dispose of them and try to subject them, right, to the status quo, to this, restrict them in their own ways, and being like, wait,
Mhm,
what you're saying is a value, who you are is valuable, right? And being reaffirmed, and
mm.
also having that trust in me and reaffirming me in that way, and like literally decensoring themselves and like being like, this is your life, girl, this is your world.
Wow.
And it was like, that's exactly what I think I'm gonna do.
Yeah, you're like, I got this. I got
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Excellent, Essence. Thank you so, so much. I'm sure people will have questions for you, but we're going to move on to our final panelist to share some final thoughts with us before we open it up for Q&A. And we're excited to welcome JJ, Bright Promises Youth Council Guide. JJ, our discussion so far has focused on work within one organization or one community. Can you tell us about the Bright Promises Youth Council and share how you are supporting these youth leaders as they work to build a coalition among youth from different communities and backgrounds?
Yeah, I can try. So coalition, quite frankly, is not a word that I use like at all, except for in like resumes and grants. But the sentiment, like it's very
Love it.
to think about like the common goals, the desirable outcomes. Coalitions really help lean us into the mindset of collaboration, which touches on all of the advice that we heard earlier, where when it's possible to really lean into how you can collaborate with or get out of the way for young people. And so this council is pretty interesting because all of the young people who are in the council, they are representatives from Bright Promises grantee partners. So they're already really involved in service-based work, movements that are near and dear to them, and whatever range that's kind of there. So when we come to the council, it's less about creating new work and more of a space for them to get to know each other. They do a lot of individual self-work that is ideally there to inform the peer discussions that we have, so that it's like, I've asked them to do some sort of reflection. We come together as a group and they're able to talk about what that's looked like and felt like for them.
Mm-hmm.
It culminates in this public project that is going online May 23rd. So for my portion today, I'll be, of course, inviting you to check that out, but also thinking about 3 areas that I kind of recommend people reflect on, which have all been named before. They've been named already, so I'll just kind of speak further to them. The first one I say is voice for sure. Then we've got power and agency, and a little bit of time to think about the differences and connections between those. And so I think no matter who you are or like what work you do, we can all benefit from taking the time to do the self work to reflect on how we improve our culture at large and how we understand our culture at large. So there is a tool, I'm not going to share it in a slide, but there is a tool that I really pull myself back to a lot, which is Roger Hart's Ladder for Youth Participation. I use it a lot in my reflection and my evaluation, even in interviews when I approach spaces to figure out if I want to work with them, to see where they're at and how they look at young people. So that's something we can share afterwards. And I think it's really nice to just reflect on like the levels of how you are increasing levels of power and control when it comes to decision making between adults and young people. That's really what that kind of helps kickstart for me. So transitioning into what was the first one I said? Voice, yeah. So the advice there is to actively seek out and listen to the voices of young people like at large, that meaning in spaces that have nothing to do with you, but then also those who are participating in movement making, which is happening at various levels. So not all young people are involved in movement making, but for those who are, introducing them to each other. That's the nice part about the Bright Promises Youth Council, is that they're meeting people who are in orgs that are similar to them and different, but that they all have this peer space that's really automatic, just in the interest of movement making. So introducing them to each other. Tony mentioned not hoarding them, right? Sabrina also talked about this. For me, there's like, the advice too would be to support intergenerational spaces and really, like bringing joy and power to the voice of young people, like speaking positively about their voices. And I say that because I think we all can enjoy being playful about the differences between generations and the dynamics between them. And I think that that can be a lot of fun, but we also should be mindful that there is a divergence between how young people characterize themselves and how adults often characterize them or group them. And that's usually deficit based. So if we can flip into the other headspace of speaking value onto their voices, I think that that's very helpful. It's very tempting for adults and anyone with power to assume or tell young folks what they need rather than ask their needs. So it's a very simple one, but asking or even sharing what your assumptions are, you're going to make assumptions. You're going to have ideas is, but coming from that space of like, here's what I think, what do you think? Or what is it that you feel like you need? Adults can be very tempted to approach young people very critically, and critique is really great. People do need to be developed. There are professional standards. There is a world out there, but also just reflecting on how you're approaching that and how you can be speaking value onto them and also developing them critically. And a piece of that is honoring the range for me, the range of young
Mhm.
people. You've got people who are ready to hit the ground running, doing X, Y, and Z. And you've got people who are like, I just got here, my friend told me to come here. So like that range is there. Young people are not, no group of marginalized folks are a monolith, but the way that
That's
we
right.
culture, those norms wants to like reduce people, especially
Mhm.
marginalization for me is like comes back to the paper. You know, you've got little slivers of space on the side. So there's not really a lot of room to talk about the range there when you set up society in that way. So if we're
Mhm.
acknowledging that that power dynamic already exists, we can do our part to sort of honor the range and space that young people bring because they're coming at this from all angles because that's what people are. People are really varied. So I think that's what I would say on the voice portion, and then we can either pause or transition to the other one if that's making sense. Y'all following?
Yeah, no, this is excellent. This is
Slide.
excellent.
I was slide. I'm just trying to remember everything that we talked about so far. So the
We
other
talked about
one
power and
thing,
agency as the other
yeah,
two. And
okay,
then I
let's
know
do
you were
power.
gonna talk about Trauma Informed Awareness Day as well. Just give the date and a little bit of information so we can make sure everyone comes and hears from all of our youth.
Solid. Okay, I can do that. So then, yeah, let's do power because it's kind of related to how we left off anyway, with acknowledging the power dynamics. So analyzing power dynamics between youth and adults in society at large is very beneficial. Like, what does that look like? What were the dynamics that we were handed? This was named a little bit earlier, but I'll put it there again. Circles as a mindset can be really helpful in combating like power dynamics that are based in hierarchy. And so it's very
Mm,
view young people and adults in a hierarchy.
mhm.
Of course, like as adults, especially as adults who are taking care of or leading, developing young folks, you have responsibilities, you have rules, you have laws, you have all of these things that we do need to be mindful of. And so I think it is also very important to name what your role is, name what those boundaries are, and share those because it can also be very tempting for adults or people who just have a little bit of power to use that to kind of overstep. And so if you are naming
Right.
the dynamics, if you are naming the rules and the limits that come with your role or whatever that space is, that can really help building that trust element for people to see, okay, this person, if I do X, Y, and Z, this is how they're going to respond to that. So being able to like name the limits of your power can really help combat that feeling of like, there's just this person with a whole lot of power. Power does not have to be a dirty word. I think it's the way that it's been used in the history of our societies. There's a lot of darkness
Mhm.
there. But power also opens doors, power also changes paradigms and dynamics, etc. So it's something to talk about and to
Yeah,
name,
that's
analyze.
right. I love
Um,
it.
yeah,
And
let
then
me
30 seconds on agency, because we want to leave a little bit of time
yeah,
for Q&A at the end. But no, you're
yeah.
dropping all kind of nuggets here, JJ.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I could do this all day. No, I couldn't actually. On agency, I think it connects
Mhm.
back to the range, like giving young people the space to say no.
Mm,
Really important, especially in the challenges. We were talking about challenges earlier. So sometimes they're not interested in doing the thing. And so we have to be cool with that. Or
yeah,
sometimes we want to get out the way, we want to give them the power and the space, and they are already conditioned often to be looking to adults to take charge. So you have to,
absolutely.
even if you are interested in that, you have to be ready to combat that conditioning that they have.
That's deep.
I think that agency, letting people say no and showing them that it's okay and that you respect that, helps
Mm,
people feel that they are sitting in their agency.
that's right. That's good. That's good, JJ. Thank you. I don't know if I hope all of you that are here listening to all this are getting as much out of this as I am. So finally, JJ, can you plug Trauma Informed Awareness Day? Just give the date and where people can find our youth who are going to be taking over the Bright Promises Foundation's social media channels.
Well, there you go. You set the space. It's going to be the Bright Promises social media channels, but the description I'm going to throw in the chat. I just copied it out of an email because someone
Yay.
asked me, wait, what are we doing? So here you go.
I love
There's
it.
the date, and there's the description and the piece. But the short bits is Trauma Informed Awareness Day is a statewide recognition about overcoming the adversities and importance of prevention, community resilience, and trauma-informed care. So the young people are just exploring what that means to them, what that's looked like in the past, and how the work that they're doing with their grantee partners connects to these concepts of building a future where we think about health a little bit differently, and we think about transformative action and connection to health. And it's May 23rd.
Excellent. Love it. Thank you, JJ. Thank you all. I don't even want to stop, but it's time for me to turn this back over to Catherine to moderate and facilitate any questions and to wrap us up. But can we just give a big round of applause to our outstanding panelists and special guests? Oh my goodness. All right, Catherine, it's over to you.
Thank you all so much. This has been an information-packed 53 minutes so far, and we're going to try to get as much more information in answering all of the great questions that come up. JJ, I'm going to field our first question over to you in relation to the last bit of your recommendations about sharing power with youth. And I love this idea that power doesn't have to be a dirty word. There's some curiosity around what does that balance look like of being able to give youth the capacity to lead, but also being able to come in and provide that assistance and support where young people need it. So can you speak a little bit about your experience striking that balance?
Yeah, a little bit. I think that being able to open yourself to being questioned, if you think again about like the way that a lot of us have been taught to think about power, there's this because I said so, or do what I say, or because I'm this age or whatever. So inviting people to, especially young people, to question you and to understand why this is happening and where this is coming from and what are the sources. Do we have demands that are attached to funding? Do we have things that are just traditions or pieces of work that were started before they got there? Is there space for something new? So being able to name those things and like invite that questioning and letting people know as much of what you know as possible, I think helps people feel like they're sharing power better.
Thank you so much, JJ. Sabrina, can you share a little bit of insight from Project Vision's perspective about how you all have striked that balance, given the more sort of research-heavy approach that you all have taken with youth engagement recently?
Yeah, of course. I think for us, it's just really like emphasizing that mentorship relationship and just kind of always telling the kids, you know, like we're always here. Like something I always tell my youth is like, I'm always here to just provide you skills and like teach you, you know, ways that you can do something. But ultimately, it's always up to you guys how you want to take that approach and how you choose to implement them. So, you know, I think more oftentimes it does end up really well and the kids are able to learn from it. They're always just kind of like that once in a while. It's like, oh, a student's like, oh, well, you know, you're going to leave it up to me. I might just, you know, slack off a little bit. But it's also part of like that learning aspect too, of like sitting down and going back to the conversation. Like, okay, you know, like I supported you in this way. Like, unfortunately, it didn't come out best. Like, how can I support you even more to make sure that we're hitting these certain markers and, you know, we're actually really going to your full potential and value? Because I think too, like kids, they already can tell that a lot of adults, like, you know, don't see them as valuable as they are, like they really underserve them. So it's really just like reminding them again too, like, hey, you do have that value. And again, thinking about that growth mindset and like, you know, you're not stuck at where you are at like 15, 16 years old. Like, you know, I felt that way too. And also reminding the youth, like, you know, I was a youth once as you guys. So just kind of fostering a relationship that I saw myself, you know, similar to Essence, like that my own mentors had with me essentially.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. And I think you hit on something so important is that adults, even with all the passion and care that we have, we don't always get it right. Essence Jade, I'm hoping that you can kind of drop a final piece of wisdom on us. And with your experiences and now with the leadership that you bring to Chicago Freedom School, Is there any sort of final advice that you give for all of us as we are in, Tony, I love how you said, as we are learners, as we are moving through these spaces and these frameworks, what would your sort of final piece of advice be as we all keep learning and failing forward as we do better to support our youth?
Oh my goodness. We've covered so much, and I'm so grateful for all of the points that have been uplifted. Again, I think it's really just as simple as just listening to the youth, and in doing so, challenging the discomfort that stems, right? That internal discomfort that stems like from that distrust, right? Of like, wait a minute, why don't I want to listen to this person? Or why am I having these feelings? Right? And challenging yourself and challenging others, right? Not being afraid to challenge others in that. And just challenging that discomfort and imploring, why is it that I maybe have these internal beliefs around young people, or why am I having these thoughts and feelings? And from there, being able to work through it, to similar to what JJ said, hey, if this is something that's contingent on something that is absolutely necessary for whatever funding purpose or whatever the case is, then even thinking, how can I communicate in a way that is still empowering this young person and enabling them to make this decision, giving them that agency in that room to exercise their own personal power.
Thank you so much, Essence J. That is so powerfully put. And in these final moments here, we do want to send you all off into your lunch hour with a little bit of food for thought. So we've captured some of the tips and strategies that have been shared so far today, and all of these recommendations with some additional details, as well as all of the resources that were referenced today, the QR code to the additional information that Sabrina shared on that framework. We have the Youth Leadership Ladder that JJ mentioned, some really cool upcoming workshops and trainings hosted by Chicago Freedom School. So we'll be sharing all of those resources with you along with the slides from today's presentation, and these tips and strategies that you can apply, we hope, right away in your work with children and youth. So we have these advice to use youth-led curriculums and learnings, bringing youth to community, to the youth, especially through peer-to-peer mentorship, hosting youth-led workshops and circles. And I think I saw a lot in the chat about this idea of circles as a framework really resonating. We also have this need to create safe spaces. And Catherine, I loved what you shared about values and guidelines, and how these aren't just documents, but these are living, breathing tools that help to create a way that we share space together. We heard so much today about trusting youth's ability to lead, creating those realistic goals with youth, and extending grace. That really happening through this process. I love the idea of listening, learning, and asking, would you like me to come in here? Would you like me to contribute? Catherine, I think you gave some really great scripts. JJ as well, some really wonderful scripts that adults can use to be able to engage a little differently. And then we also have this really great recommendations around analyzing those power dynamics, trying to find ways to really elevate and promote agency among youth, and making space for them to be able to say no and commit at those various levels in the way that makes sense to them. So we will share out all of these tips and strategies with you, along with a recording of today's webinar. And as our final call to action, we invite you to join us again on May 23rd. We are going to be hearing directly from more of our incredible youth leaders on Trauma-Informed Awareness Day. These will be some of the young people from the Bright Promises Youth Council that JJ talked about today. And we also invite and ask all of you to pick one thing that you learned today and share it with someone else. Forward the recording of this webinar, copy and paste one of these tips and circulate it to your team. Sharing this knowledge is how we're able to help more children and youth step into their leadership and full promise and potential. So we appreciate all of your help getting these great innovative practices into the hands of more people.